you. I hope that you're doing well, that you're enjoying a fantastic day. I cannot believe we are sitting here for the second annual Pan That Palette finale. I mean, it just, wow. 2014, all about the Urban Decay Naked palette. 2015, all about the LORAC Pro. They're done. 2 prize fighting palettes are out of my collection. I'm just so, it feels good. It feels really, really good. So before we get started into what I learned, kind of the experience panning between these two YouTube hyped palettes, I want to say thank you. Thank you for choosing to jump into the challenge this year. Thank you for continuing your journey in eyeshadow next year with Pan That Palette. I've been so motivated, inspired, and encouraged by your progress, by your videos, by your Instagram photos, by your Twitter feeds. It's just, this is such an amazing community, and it just warms my heart to know that Pan That Palette is turning into a game changer for so many of you in terms of your makeup collection. It's changing your perspective, changing you to realize kind of what you want your Holy Grail collection to look like in the future. And I just thank you for allowing me to be a part of that journey for you. So your friendship, it's awesome and amazing. And if you are new to Pan That Palette, I challenge you to choose a palette out of your collection, because you will learn so much, not just about yourself, but also what you want your makeup to do for you as you move on into the future. So let's get into, the experience panning Urban Decay Naked palette versus panning LORAC Pro. It was a whole lot easier this year. I give you some encouragement that if you've panned a palette this year, next year is going to be even easier, because you're going to be in that groove. You know what it feels like to finish some shadows out of your collection if that was a first experience for you this year. So you're going to have even more success next year. As far as the Urban Decay Naked palette went, it actually took me a little bit. No, I could say that I panned it within a year, because I had some pan in shades like Virgin, Sin, and Half Baked when I started it. But by the time I finished backup shades for things, I ended up finishing this within a year. The LORAC Pro palette did not take me quite a year. I started it brand spanking new back in January, and I finished it on Christmas Day of this year. The reason I got through that is because I multitasked a lot of shades, but I also brought in lots of other shades from my collection in LORAC palettes in particular, because I wanted to work on what I could from that. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, learning experiences. The biggest lesson I've taken away from now panning 2 palettes is don't be afraid of shades in your palettes. I know that is a stumbling block that a lot of you have that are new to panning palettes. I had the same thing when I panned the Urban Decay Naked palette, because shades like Creep, Gunmetal, and Dark Horse in particular really kind of intimidated me. But by the time I finished panning them, they ended up not only being shades that I appreciated, but shades I love. I say that about Half Baked because that was the one shade that I was kind of like, I didn't like gold on my eyes, period. Now I appreciate it. I can't imagine not having it in my collection. Moving that learning curve into the LORAC Pro palette this year, the LORAC Pro palette actually pushed me out of my comfort zone more. It was a great thing to have a community of friends, because you guys gave me so many ideas, swapping tips like mixing shades, layering shades, trying different eye combinations, because there were several shades in here that I flat out did not like when I started this palette. Let's first talk about Garnet. Garnet was the one shade, it attracted me to the palette because it was so different than anything I had. But when I really got down to it, I was like, oh, heck no, I'm not putting that on my eyes. It's going to make me look sickly dead. No. It is now my absolute favorite shade from this palette. Just to kind of quickly talk about it, my favorite way to wear it was with taupe, or taupe-like shade. I'd run out of taupe when I started Garnet, but to wear taupe in the transition area, Garnet as a crease shade, and then pop the L'Oreal Infallible shade in Amber Rush all over the lid, and then use cream as a highlight. I absolutely adored that look, and in fact, it's made me plan on bringing in this Amber Rush Infallible shadow with my Stila in the light palette this year, because there's that kind of reddish bronzy shade in there called Sunset. So just, that was one of the ones that I first got stretched out. Another one was the shade Deep Purple. I know there was the hashtag people kind of got sick of the OMG Deep Purple is a beast, but it was, and it was so helpful to have many of you painting that same shade right along with me, to talk about using it as liner, to talk about using it as crease shades, and how to make it work as lid shades, because that shadow is black with purple shimmer. It's tough. It's hard to work with. Another shade that I really just was not fond of, I wasn't fond of it as I panned it either, but I learned to, you know, appreciate it as I layered it. That was the shade Gold from this palette. I say that because that gold in particular is so orange, it's not very flattering for my skin tone, but it doesn't mean it's going to be that case for everybody. Lastly, the shade that I'll admit it, I didn't like it at all when I started painting the palette, was the shade Mauve. I say that because pink shadows on my eyes tend to make me look really ill and made me kind of afraid to have the Naked 3 palette in my collection. But now that I've panned Mauve, I love it as a transition shade on my eyes, pop crease shades over it. I'm not afraid of my Naked 3 palette anymore. Or to go in and use Mauve, you know, when I was at the end of it, I was using it as a blush. It worked out perfectly. My favorite way to wear Mauve was to wear Mauve in my transition area, pewter in the crease, and then I would pop light bronze on the lid. That was one of my other favorite looks. But I mean, just, there were so many things that I learned to love about this palette. The one caveat I had was the shades didn't seem consistent in how they panned. They were very powdery, lots of kickback, but some of them were so densely packed that it would take forever to get through them. So overall, I had more fun panning this palette, but I think that you get a little bit better value for your money going with something like the Urban Decay Naked palette, because you get a little bit more shadow if you want just to have a neutral palette for every single day. But for my collection in the future, this is an awesome choice because you can pan them very quickly, so I know that I'm not going to have a bunch of expired shadows sitting around. The other thing that it did this year with Pan That palette is I've really, like I said, I've learned how to love shades that I didn't like initially, that I wouldn't have touched initially. Let's go into how that changed with the LORAC Mega Pro palette. As I've panned shades out of the Pro palette, I learned to use this as a backup contender, because if you go with these first two shades of Fawn and Camel, tap your brush in between, you get a dupe to taupe. So that was a nice change up to wear with light bronze and sable in my crease. I loved that combination. Excuse me. Then to go over here to Deep Plum or Dusty Plum and Orchid, if you mix these two shadows together, you get a very similar look to Mauve. So again, when I ran out of Mauve, this was a nice way to go in, maybe pop some black in the crease and then have a silver on your lid. Then you go down here, when I ran out of light bronze, if you mix sand and copper together, it makes a very close dupe to light bronze. And then obviously I was able to go in and finish cream, white, and then hit pan and cashmere. I was using stone, and then what surprised me were these two shades right here, khaki and brown. I adored wearing brown in my crease with light bronze all over the lid and a red lip this summer and an orangey colored blush. And this shade right here, khaki, these light taupey browns were something that I never really cared for before. I thought they were too cool toned for my skin, but this is hands down my favorite LORAC shade ever to wear with the shade Slate. Now I'm currently wearing it with the shade Night Sky from the Stila in the light palette. It's a beautiful cool tone brown, and I would not have ventured into that had I not panned the LORAC Pro palette, because I was trying to find shades that would go with it, and I was really kind of sick of wearing a warm brown, and I stepped into it, and now I can't imagine doing my makeup without it. So thanks to Pan That palette with shades I didn't like, but now I'm encouraged to go into some of my other palettes and go for those cooler tone shades that at first intimidated me. So I wanted to share that with you. And basically, I look at my palettes like as I go through, because I get asked quite often, like, how do you just sit and concentrate on your palette? I like to pan looks personally because it works a lot better for me to really learn what I like and what I don't like. Because when you're changing one variable at a time, whether you're changing a crease shade or a brow bone highlight. I really learned the formulas I like and I don't like out of my collection. Case in point, like my eye look today, I'm still wearing cashmere, khaki, cashmere and khaki from the LORAC Mega Pro palette. I went through with Night Sky from my Steel in the Light and the Ebony shade that I've been using for a while to set my liner, and then I went through with a Too Faced matte white shade from the Matte Eyes palette. I have a really good idea how I want my makeup to turn out like, and I can see, you know, how I feel about the formulas working all together by changing just that highlighting shade, just that crease shade, and that way I don't feel like I'm recreating the wheel all the time, because I know, like I said, that's how I've fallen in love with shades that I would not have touched before. So just to kind of give you some encouragement to expand out of your comfort zone a little bit. And the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about too is use your palette kind of like, let's go with the swimming analogy. My son's a swimmer, so use your palette as like your diving board. Every day you step onto that diving board, it's going to give you that base foundation. You're using it for a crease shade or a lid shade or fill in your brows or set your line or whatever have you. You're using at least one shade out of that palette every single day. But every time you do your makeup, you're making that decision to jump off a different way. So you could do a swan dive or a pike or a triple twist backflip, you know, a cannonball, whatever you want to do. So you have that stability of your palette that you're physically panning, and then you have the ability to change the look based on your mood, based on what you're wearing, based on the season, all that kind of thing. So don't ever feel limited with your palette and that you're just stuck in it day after day after day, because you want makeup to be fun. You want it to be exciting and you want to be inspired. I feel like I have that now because like I said, I use my palette as that diving board. I bring in other shades and make huge progress in other palettes, because that's the other thing. I went through with my LORAC Pro 2 palette. I completely used the shade Buff as I panned Sable. And then I went through and hit pan in beige. I think I've got my palette right here. Yeah, I mean, you can hit pan in all sorts of other things in your collection, sticking with consistent looks and just getting them out of the way. Because really, your eyeshadow commitment, if you wear the same look every day, it's only gonna be a few months and you're gonna be completely done out of your life kind of situation with that shadow, which is what I wanna do, because I literally wanna whittle down my collection. So let's go to the conversation of which one is worth repurchasing out of these two. Not ready to answer that question yet, because this year I'm panning Stila. Next year I'm thinking I'm going to go on and attempt the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette, because those are by far the 4 biggest neutral palette contenders that have been around. I mean, Kat Von D's pretty close up there now, but and maybe Tartelette palettes, but these are 2 of the powerhouses, and I kind of want to do a big video on who ultimately wins the neutral palette challenge, if you will. So that's about it. Thank you again for just jumping into the challenge, and I encourage you in your journey, and I want to follow you if you are new to the panning community and want to jump in, because like I said, we are always sharing ideas and always sharing tips and tricks and things that work for us. Number 1 tip I can offer you is multitask. You will not believe how great it will feel when you realize you can multitask. Your eyeshadow is contouring shades. Your eyeshadow is highlighting shades for your face, because it's safe to wear your eyeshadow on the rest of your face, but you can't always wear your highlighters on your eyes. You can always multitask shades in your palette as blush or as bronzer, or you can go through and set your liners. You can also use them, always use them for different purposes on your face. So a nail polish even, I know that was a popular thing for a lot of you to do this year on YouTube. If you didn't like a shade necessarily, you pop it into a clear nail polish and there you go. So it's cool. It's very cool. I wish you all the best of luck as you go into 2016 panning. I know I'm going to be having an intro video with my Steel in the Light palette pretty soon. So that's about it for now. I'll be seeing you soon with a lot of videos coming your way. So take care. Catch you later.